Hey, this is Ronnie at the Rod Shop, and in this video we're going to be looking at changing out the alternator on a 2004 Hyundai Santa Fe with a 2.5 liter. In this video we're going to be going over the steps of how to take the plastic shielding off to get to the alternator and the wheel well. You have to remove the wheel. You get in the wheel well, there's going to be some plastic shielding that's going to block your view. We're going to take that out, and then you'll see the serpentine belt and how it routes. I will provide the serpentine belt routing little image here in the video. And also I'm going to show you how the alternator comes out without having to, it's kind of cumbersome to get your hands up in some of the holes, but you got to disconnect the wires, but it's not that bad. And luckily the way they made it, you know, a lot of alternators, if you've got an alternator, it's got one big long bolt that it pivots on, and then the lock bolt that kind of just locks into place. The way they did this one is they made a cradle. The bracket's kind of a cradle, and that bolt sits in it, so that makes life a lot easier because the way the belt's pulling on it always keeps it in the cradle. It's a really slick design. I like it. It makes life a lot easier to get this alternator off. And the biggest thing, and you may run into this maybe while you're watching the video, but one of the biggest things that's an issue, or I think it's kind of stupid, is the belt tensioner, the serpentine belt tensioner, and the inner fender well. I mean, it looks like you got a lot of room, but the tensioner, if this is the engine, the tensioner pulley is right up against the engine, so there's no way to get the belt off of it, so you have to take the tensioner off. But in this video I'm going to show you don't have to take the tensioner off and then try to figure out how to get all the holes realigned and stuff. All you got to do is back the bolts out to get it flopping loose, and then slip the belt out behind it between the tensioner and the engine, and then slip it back in when you put the new belt on, or put the old belt back on, whichever you're going to do. So before we get into the video, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, because I'm always coming up with some information that might be helpful to somebody. So let's get into the video. First, we can disconnect the battery. You can just disconnect the negative side. I've already loosened the nut. You're going to want to pin it somewhere to where it's not going to flip back and connect while you're working on it. That sucks to get a nice arc because the battery connected back up. Next, take the wheel off on the passenger front side. Then we got to remove this cover, and you got a bolt there and a bolt right back there. Those are 10 millimeters. Now let's look at this cover real quick. It actually looks like it could have two bolts right there, but there's only two bolts in it. It looks like it could have had another one there, which wasn't one in it, and then there's one up front. So this one didn't have it in it. So if you're fixing to take this off, look for these. At least look for about 4 bolts. If it's never been touched and no bolts fell out of it, then you should have 1 up front, 3 at the top. Now with the cover out, you can see how it's laid out. And here's your alternator. And there's a bolt here, and there's a one to the kind of above and at the back. Can't see it from down here, but I'll find it here in a minute. But what you're going to want to do first off is to release the tensioner. It's going to have to come down, and it takes a 3/8. I've got my long flex head ratchet so I can get a little bit of maneuverability. I'm going to flex it down. I don't know if I can do it with one hand, and you can kind of see it. When I do that, I'm going to make the belt loose, and I'm going to lip it off the alternator and try to keep the belt in the rest of the position it's in. Of course, I'm going to have to inspect the belt and see if it's any good. If it's got cracks and stuff, this is the time to change it. Okay, as I said, you would find the other bolt to the alternator. Let me see if I can zoom in on it. Right there it is. It takes a 12 millimeter socket. Then you have the one on the bottom. It takes a 14. That bolt is kind of locked in on the back side the way it's made, so you don't have to worry about trying to get a wrench on the back side. You just need to take that nut loose. Before you take the alternator off, though, we'll have to disconnect the wires, and that's going to be up under the car and kind of fun to get to. Now, due to the fact I can't get the camera and me and my hands and everything into the engine compartments to show you what I'm doing, because of the way the tensioner is, the tensioner, I mean, when you look straight down, it looks like the tensioner has a long ways away from the inner fender well, but it doesn't. It's just it's about the equivalent of what the width of it is. You can take it out, but the bottom bolt won't come all the way out. When it'll come loose from the threads. When you remove the other bolts, you can lift the whole tensioner out, slide it out or down, but there's really no need in all that. All you gotta do is just loosen the tensioner to where it's flopping around, where it can flop. And then I'm going to show you how to slide the belt out and then how you're going to put it back in. What we're looking, that's the engine. From where we're at here, this is the wheel well. We're at the wheel well. We're looking at the engine. Here's the tensioner, it's hanging. So this is hanging on the tensioner with the ribbed side up, not the smooth side. The tensioner is smooth and it runs on the smooth side, but like that, what you're going to do is you're going to bend this. You're going to flip the belt like that. Make sure I'm getting it in view there, but you're going to flip it like that and come off the tensioner. And then when you go to put it back on, you're going to take the belt and work it up there and then just let it slip back. So I hope that makes sense, but you're just going to slip it off, slip it back on. Okay, I've pulled out the plug. There's a little push tab, and it took two hands. There's a hole here between the exhaust pipe and the frame, and then you got a hole here, and it took two hands. It took one hand to come up here and squeeze that tab, and the other hand in the other hole to pull it out. And it just pulls out like that. It comes out to the side, out to the back. So it pushes in from like to the back to the front. It goes back to the front, if that makes sense. Then up here, you have a boot that covers. And the sun's blinding the camera, isn't that great? Let me see if I can put a light on it. It looks like it's a 12 millimeter, maybe a 14. I can't tell for the sunlight blinding me, but it's 12 or 14 millimeter. You have to get a wrench and unscrew it and get your cable loose. Okay, I've removed the upper bolt and I've backed out that nut. That big bolt does not go through a hole. It just sits in a catch, so we'll just lift it off. And by the way, the nut to the actual battery wire in the back was 12 millimeter. The drawbacks of working out in a driveway, the sunlight. You also have a wire, this wire. It's got a clip that sticks into the alternator. You have to get that loose. I'm going to use a tool like that. It's just a clip removal tool to get behind the clip and pull it. It may break it, I don't know. It depends on how brittle it is. So when I got the alternator off, before I went through the painstaking part of buying a new one and spending the money and stuff to find out if that was what was wrong with it or not, I took it down to 2 different parts stores because the back valve cover, actually both valve covers, but especially the back one, was leaking oil excessively bad, and it just filled up that alternator with oil. So even when I pulled the alternator off, I could see that it was oil soaked and oil would come out of it. So I mean, that's not a good sign for an alternator. So I took the alternator down to have it checked. I took it to O'Reilly's and I think I took it to Advanced, and both their machines said the alternator was good. It worked. But I just didn't really trust the fact that that thing had been filled with oil. I checked other things. When it said it was good, I came back, I looked things over. I looked at fuses, looked at wires, and everything was, all the voltages were going to where they were supposed to be. Just because, I didn't trust the alternator being soaked with oil, the customer agreed, yeah, go ahead and just, replace the alternator while you're there. So I got a new alternator, and that was the problem. So that tells you that sometimes those machines down there at the parts stores aren't always accurate. As you can see, it's a cradle that catches it. Instead of it being a bracket with a hole and you have to slide your alternator lower bolt through a hole, it's just a catch. The reason why they did that is, if you can see it, there is a bracket that supports the CV shaft, and it bolts to the side of the engine. If for some reason that does turn out to be a hole, you're going to have to remove those two major bolts that hold that bracket to the engine first in order to drop the CV shaft. But most of them I have seen are always this cradle. Now the biggest challenge is this bolt, this bottom bolt that we took the nut loose. As you can see, I left the nut on the lower bolt. You can see that the head is made as a square and it goes up against the stop. That way you don't have to put a wrench on the back side of it. So they made that really smart engineering on that one. I'll give them kudos for that. The problem is this bolt clamps this down and tightens up on that cradle in there. So when you take it loose, it's still stuck. You'll have to get the screwdriver or something to pry as you wiggle the alternator, and it'll work itself out of the cradle. But it takes a little bit of effort. As you can see here, here's a nut for the battery cable, and it is 12 millimeter. So I'm going to remove this bolt. Looking at it, and it's so oil soaked, I'd say it probably is bad, but before I go and have the customer invest in money on buying an alternator, I'm going to ensure this one is bad. I mean, more than likely it is. It could be things like a blown fuse, which I've checked and it's not. But we'll just check to make sure. I mean, about 99.9% sure it's the alternator that's gone bad. Okay, I'm cheating you guys because I couldn't really show you me actually sticking this in there because there's no way to get me and my hands and arms and the camera and everything in there if I had a rack. But this is the whole idea of this video. These videos are, can you repair your car out in the driveway or at your home? Of course, if you got to lift it home, kudos to you. But all I did is put the long bolt back in the alternator. I just snugged it up. I didn't even snug it. I just put it up there till it stopped on the with my fingers. I don't want to tighten it down. I don't want to clamp it. I don't want to clamp the alternator. So I just set it up in that cradle, just like it was on pulling it off. I just set it up in there, raised it up with one hand, and got the other hand up here to the bolt at the top, and just got it started. The bolts are not tight or anything. I just got it set in there now. And at this point, I'll go ahead and tighten everything down, and I'll get up underneath it and hook up the wires, and then I'm going to go ahead and put a new Serpentine belt on it. Yay. So that's it. That's how you change out the alternator, and that's how you slip the Serpentine belt in and out too. That's those two little tricks there. So if you like the video, be sure to like and subscribe, and always check back because I'm always working on something crazy. See you in the next one.